Hello, this is Pete, or Kenshin1913, and this is a Game of Thrones review. And actually, as I mentioned in the very first Game of Thrones review, that me and Rob, we're going to retroactively review the Game of Thrones shows up until the third season, or the newest episode. So, this is going to be episode 1. Now, as you can see, Rob is not with me this time, and, I'm just going to do it by myself. Rob will be in some of these. We're going to try to review them together, but sometimes we can't get together. Anyways, we decided to come up with a criteria of how we're going to review the show. So I'm just going to quickly go over that, and then we're going to start talking about it. So for the Game of Thrones, each episode we're going to kind of do a brief summary of what our likes or dislikes are, and I'll put all this stuff in the video description. So what our likes and dislikes are. We're going to talk about new characters and what we like about them and what we dislike about them, although I'm probably going to skip that this episode because there's just so many. Is this episode staying true to the book? And then basically we're going to describe differences between the book and the show. And then finally, a best line from the show, from this episode, or best kill. And then basically at the end of, after we review all the episodes, we're gonna review the whole season. So basically we have a wrap up episode that we're gonna do where we're gonna review various things. So anyways, let's start talking about Game of Thrones. As Game of Thrones is a book by George R. R. Martin, and it's in a series of books called The Song of Ice and Fire. And basically HBO picked up the rights or whatever to make a TV show about it. So, basically, okay, so Game of Thrones, first episode. The title of it is called Winter is Coming, which is a line that the Starks use a lot. Now, who are the Starks? We'll get into that, alright? So, what about this show? This show, basically, I'm going to try to review it as, like, I never saw it, but there are going to be parts where I'm going to know what's going on, obviously, because this is in the future. Anyways, so, basically, what is Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones is like a medieval kind of fantasy soap opera kind of thing. I wouldn't call it soap opera, but it's like a medieval fantasy television show, okay? It takes place in the world of Westeros. Now, Westeros is a medieval kind of land, and it's broken up into 7 kingdoms. And basically, I'm only going to talk about the stuff that is in the episode. So I'm not going to go over all 7 kingdoms because that would just take way too long. So in the beginning, you see the Wall, which is a huge wall, and it's in the very northern part of Westeros. Basically, it's a wall that's protecting, that's keeping out, it's keeping out something. It's keeping out something. It's kind of like the Great Wall of China. If you think about it, they built it to keep out I think the Mongols, whoever Genghis Khan was working for. Anyways, then you have Winterfell, which is south of that. It's basically they call it the North. It's Winterfell. That's one of the lands. And then you have King's Landing, which is the capital of Westeros, or the 7 Kingdoms. And then finally, there's a city across the sea of Westeros to the east called Pentos, and the little sea that's there, they call it the Narrow Sea. Anyways, so in this show, there are 4 main houses, okay? And each of them have sigils, which are basically animals or whatever, various symbols representing their houses. So the 4 main that we're going to talk about in this episode are the Starks, who are basically the lords of Winterfell. And their sigil is a wolf, or a dire wolf, which is basically a big-ass wolf. And then you have Baratheon, and basically the Baratheons are actually the kings of Westeros. Kings, and they're the royalty. They took over from another family. They took over, and now they are the king. And their sigil is a stag, or a deer, or whatever you want to call it. Anyways, then we have the Lannisters, which are the richest family in Westeros. They control most of the money. And their sigil is a lion. Roar. I think one of their terms is hear me roar, or something like that. And then finally we have the Targaryens, which their sigil is the 3-headed dragon. And basically, they used to be king. They used to be the royal family, but something happened. I'm not going to go into it. But some stuff happened, and now they're not. Okay, and so yeah. So kind of let's go over who the Starks are. All right. First, we have Ned Stark, who's the Lord of Winterfell. He's played by Sean Bean. His wife is Catelyn Tully, or Catelyn Stark now, and she's played by Michelle Fairley. All right, and now they have a whole bunch of kids. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of go through them really quick. They have the oldest, Robb, who's played by Richard Madden. They have Sansa, the next oldest, who is played by Sophie Turner. They have Arya, who is a tomboy, and she's played by Maisie Williams. Bran, who's the next youngest, who's the second youngest, and he's played by Isaac Hempstead Wright. And finally we have Rickon, who was played by Art Parkinson. And basically, he is the youngest of all the Stark children. Now, Ned actually had a bastard. And what a bastard is a child had out of wedlock. So basically, he ended up being unfaithful to Catelyn, and he had a son named Jon. And since they live in the north, their surname or last name is always default to Snow. So his name's Jon Snow, and he's played by Kit Harington. All right. Now there's a Ward, Ward who's Ned's I don't know, he's Ned's gopher. It's Ned's go get me my greaves or gloves or whatever. Go get me my sword, and this guy's do it. And his name is Theon Greyjoy, and he's played by Alfie Owen Allen. And then finally, just one last person for the Starks is Benjen Stark, who is the youngest brother of Ned, and he's played by Joseph Muley or something like that. Anyways, Ned is a good old friend of the king, okay? So then next we have the Baratheon, and we have Robert, who is Robert Baratheon, and he is the king of Westeros, and he's played by Mark Addy, who was in various other things. You'd actually know who Ned Stark is. Sean Bean, he was in Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. I'm not going to go over where they were because there's a lot to cover in this episode. Then we have Cersei, who was a Lannister, but she married Robert, and now she's a Baratheon, played by Lena Headey. And then we have Joffrey, their son. They have a couple of kids, but only Joffrey matters right now, by Jack Gleeson. All right, and then we have, let's see, the Lannisters. We have Jaime Lannister, who's played by Nikolaj Coster-Waldau. I think I said that right. I don't know. But anyways, him and Cersei are twins. And then we have Tyrion, who's played by Peter Dinklage, who is the dwarf or the imp or whatever. And then finally, over at the Targaryen side, we have Viserys, who is one of the Targaryens. He's basically the son of the former king, and he wants to get back over there. Okay, and he is played by Harry Lloyd. Then we have Daenerys Targaryen, who is played by Emilia Clarke. She's his brother. Illyrio, played by Roger Allam. Basically, he's like this wealthy merchant who kind of took those two guys under their wing after they left, after the whole incident with the king. And basically, well, I'll go into it. And then we have Khal Drogo, played by Jason Momoa. And then we have Jorah Mormont, played by Ian Gane. Okay, so that's all of the characters, all right, that I'm going to go over in the first episode. That's a lot of people. But I just tried to do the most important ones. So, all right, let's talk about the episode, all right, the brief summary of the episode. So, basically what happens in the episode is we're kind of started off in this world where we start at the wall at the very north, and basically, the drawbridge goes up, and these three guys go into the what is it? They go into the forest in the north, all right, and they're looking at cut up bodies and stuff, and then they end up these bodies kind of reanimate, and they end up killing them, all right, or they kill two because there's three guys, and they kill two, and then one guy runs away, and that's how the show starts. It starts off real scary and kind of what the hell is going on, and then all of a sudden, these guys that are dead, they come back to life, and bam, you're like, holy crud. So then it kind of goes to Winterfell, and basically it goes through an introduction of who all the who are all the Starks and what their names are and all that stuff, and kind of goes over like various kind of personalities. Like Jon Snow is the bastard, Rob and Theon are like buddies. Then you have like Sansa, she's like the prim and proper girl, and Arya is like a tomboy, and yeah. So kind of goes over like how the Starks are kind of like a normal family, like one of the most normal families in this world. So then we go, basically, we find out that the one guy who got away is in Winterfell, and they have to kill him because the people who walk with the, or who go with, who like defend the wall, basically they're called rangers, and if they leave their post, they get killed. Okay. On the way home from that, they find dire wolves, and now dire wolves, again, I said, are sigils of House Stark, and they've never been seen. They haven't been seen down in near Winterfell in like the longest time. So so they end up taking him, and they're gonna kill him because they don't want the dire wolves like eating or doing whatever, being crappy. But Jon Snow says there's five dire wolves and there's 5 kids. So I think it's a symbol. So Ned lets them keep it, and then Jon finds a runt, and then he keeps that one too. So each Stark has a dire wolf. Okay. They're training their own wolves, so that's crazy. All right, I think it's crazy. I mean, a little child, growing wolves or raising a wolf is pretty crazy. So, anyways, then we cut to King's Landing. All right, some dude is dead, and you meet Cersei and Jaime, and they're talking about if they found out whatever, and there's a viewer, you're like, I wonder what the hell they're talking about. So then they go back. Let me see. And then from there they go across the sea to Pentos, which is where Viserys and Daenerys are. And I'm gonna call her Dany. But anyways, they go there, and basically they talk about how the Targaryens were kind of killed, and those two have been exiled. Or no, am I getting that right? Yeah, Kids at Direwolf, King's Landing. Yeah. Anyways, they talk about how they've been exiled from Westeros, and they want to go back. And the only way they can go back is if they conquer it, like conquerors would. So basically, what they have to do is they have to sell off Viserys. He has to sell off his sister in order to do it. And so he's going to sell him to this like savage tribe called the Dothraki, and the king of that tribe is Khal Drogo. All right, and he sees her, and he's like, whatever, and then he goes away, and they're like, did it work? And they they come to a conclusion that Khal Drogo's going to take Dany as his wife. So then we go back to King's Land, or no, we go back to where are we here? I wrote all this down. We go back to, where are we here? We go back to King. What the hell is it? Winterfell, and they find out that the king is coming, and basically the king is coming to ask Ned to be his hand, because the guy that died in King's Landing was actually handed to the king, which basically the hand of the king is kind of like a vice president kind of position where they're like helping the king be a ruler, but they're more than just a vice president because they actually kind of rule. Because the hand kind of is like the second hand man to the king, and he kind of like passes laws and deals with all the crap that the king doesn't want to deal with. So the hand of the king. So he asked him to be hand of the king, and Ned's like, oh man, I don't want to leave. Because he asked them because they're good buddies, the king and Ned. And so Ned's like kind of hesitant about being, the hand of the king. So they have a huge feast in honor of, the king coming to see them in Winterfell. And then that's when we meet, like, all of these other characters, like the Lannisters. We meet Tyrion, who's probably one of the greatest characters in the show. And what else? So they're having a feast, and they're outside. And Jon Snow is not invited because he's a bastard, and Lady Stark does not like him. She is a total bitch because Jon and Rob were born at around the same time. So she was pretty ticked off about that Ned cheated on her. Although who knows what that's all about. But Ned, cheated on her, and he had a son. So basically, I talked about how we have a favorite line of the show. Okay, so Tyrion's outside with Jon because Jon can't go in, and they're talking about stuff. And basically, Tyrion, my favorite line from the show is, let me give you some advice, bastard. Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you. And then Jon's like, what the hell do you know about being a bastard? And Tyrion's like, all dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes. So that's probably one of my favorite lines from the show. It's basically taken right from the book, so it's not really anything new. But that's probably my favorite line of the whole show, or at least this one episode. So then after the feast, Ned and his wife are in bed, and they get a message from King's Landing. Basically, what's her Catelyn's sister. She was married to the guy who died. And she told him that he was poisoned and he was killed by the Lannisters. Now, the Starks and the Lannisters already don't like each other already. So basically, Ned is kind of stuck between this position where he's trying to help his friend Robert, and he doesn't want to go. So he has to choose what to do, whether he's going to save the kingdom or help out his friend or just stay up and mind his own business. And in the end, he actually decides to go with Robert down the King's Landing, to be his hand. So then after that, they cut over to the wedding of Khal Drogo and Dany. And Dany, this is where she meets Yor Mormont. Basically, he's in exile from Westeros as well because he did some bad stuff. So he's over there. And this is when she first sees dragon eggs. That's right. She sees dragon eggs because they're a gift, and she kind of gets mesmerized by them. And then after that, Khal Drogo, makes he kind of forces himself onto Dany there, and it's a harsh scene, let me tell you. So then finally, at the end of the whole thing, all right, Robert and his crew and Ned and his crew, they end up going out hunting, all right. And again, I'm going to say spoiler alerts, although I might not have said it yet. Anyway, so Bran, they all go out climb. What the hell am I saying? They all go out hunting, all right. And then Bran, he's one of the only people left. So he's climbing this wall, and he hears some noises. So he keeps climbing, and then he sees that Jaime and Cersei are doing it. Okay, and basically they see him, and then they grab him, and then Cersei's she's like, you saw, and then Jaime's like, you know what, that's it. So he says, and this is another line that I love from the show, the thing, again, George R. R. Martin wrote it as well, things that I do for love, and then he pushes Bran out, and that's how and then you see Bran's descent, and that's how the episode ends. So that's a brief summary of this episode. And then there's a lot of other things going on, and you know what? I advise you to watch it, but this is just a review. Anyways, so now that I kind of told you a review of it, we're going to talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. All right, and one of the things I didn't like about the show, because I didn't read the books beforehand. All right, I didn't like the way that HBO was showing. Was all their advertisements before the show came on was winter is coming, and then they'd be on it'd be in March or whatever, and I was like, why don't they just show the show in winter? I'm like, why are they always saying winter is coming and then it's never on? What the hell? So I was kind of ticked off about that, but then I was like, I'm not watching this show because they said winter is coming, and they were going to show the show. They should show it in winter and not in March. What the hell? So I was like, no, I'm not going to watch it. But then the first episode, I was like, oh, what the hell, I'll check it out. So, another thing that I didn't like, although there's a ton of stuff I like, I could just go over it for days. I'm just going to talk about the things that I didn't like. I didn't like all the characters in the show. There's plenty of characters that I did not mention that are in the show that will eventually be important, so I will mention them later, but I just felt like they were bombarding you with characters, right in the beginning, and it was very hard to like keep track of who's who and what's all these guys. And sometimes you feel like you have to watch it again just to kind of like understand like who is who and what's the relationship from this guy to this guy to this guy. And sometimes that can be kind of tough. And it's just the books too. I mean, even in the book, there's a ton of characters, and it's just a big world. And one thing that I did feel like is if you kind of have to watch the show, or you kind of have to read the books to understand the show. But actually, during the whole series, we'll talk about it. You kind of don't. I mean, they do a very good job of being as faithful as they can to the show without putting every little detail in it. And that was one of the things that we talked about. Is this episode staying true to the book? And I think it is. I think it does a really good job of staying true to the book. One thing that's different about it is that the children's ages are a lot different. Well, not a lot different, but they're like 3 years younger than what they actually are in the show. I think they're supposed to be like 8 and 10 and 14 and whatnot, and it actually are like 16 or whatever. But in the actual book, they're like Daenerys she's only 14 or something like that, and like Rob and stuff are only like 14, and Bran is only like, I want to say 6 or 7 or something. But they made him 10 in this show, or 8, I forget. So yeah. There are some differences, but I can understand because you don't want to show like a naked 14-year-old, because that's not right. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of sex in this show. There's a lot of gore. That's what I like about it too. That here we go with a like. I like that they don't skimp around. They don't like. It's not like Narnia where they don't show any blood or they don't show any kind of like action. It's like this is real, the real deal. You know what I mean? And even George R. R. Martin wrote it like that. So it's like, I think they did a very good job. So finally, we're gonna go over best kill, and that would have to be the second kill, which is the old ranger guy in the very beginning of the show, Garrett or something like that. He ends up getting killed by the White Walker, and then it goes into the Game of Thrones theme with the opening that shows the world of Westeros and kind of like a steampunk kind of style. So yeah. So anyways, I think this has been the review. I've been talking long enough. I hope everyone's going to enjoy it. I just kind of want to explain something, that not only am I answering these questions, I want you, the viewer, who's watching this episode or remembers the episode or whatever, who's watching this, put your things too. Like, what is your favorite kill? What's your best line? Do you think it's staying true to the book? What were your likes and dislikes? Who was your favorite character in the episode, or what, all that stuff. So I want some participation as we go through this whole process as I review Game of Thrones. Me and Rob, as we review Game of Thrones. So this has been Pete, or Kenshin 1913. This has been Game of Thrones, Episode 1 reviewed. See ya.